Today we'll be looking at the Cougar Speeder, which is a pretty unique hybrid gaming and office chair coming in at around $329. And what makes this chair interesting is that it's really trying to bridge that gap between gaming chairs and ergonomic office chairs, giving you some of the gaming aesthetics while still maintaining the comfort and functionality of an ergonomic chair. Now before we dive in, I just want to mention that this video is sponsored by Cougar. That said, they have no say in the actual review itself, and they do not get to see this video before you guys do. They're only paying for my production time, not my opinion. Now I don't take too many sponsorships, but the few that I do really help make this channel sustainable. It takes a lot of time and money to produce these videos, and acquiring dozens of high-end office chairs isn't cheap either. So these occasional sponsorships really help allow me to continue doing this. So with that out of the way, let's get right into the review. Starting with the design, you'll notice that the Cougar Speeder has a pretty unique look. It has this racing-inspired aesthetic with an X-frame backrest that gives it some gaming flair. The chair has this premium automotive-style finish that makes it really stand out compared to your standard office chair. What's interesting though is that from the front, it really just looks like a normal mesh office chair. From a design perspective, it's definitely an ergonomic office chair first and a gaming chair second. You can think of it as an ergonomic office chair with some extra gaming flair, which makes it look less boring, since most all mesh office chairs tend to look pretty much the same. It works whether you have it in a home office or a gaming setup. It can really make your gaming setup pop, but if you work from home and are on a Zoom call or something, no one would even be able to tell from the front of the chair. I also really like the neutral gray and black color. It's not too bright and gaudy like you see with many gaming chairs. Overall, I think it gives you a really nice balance between professional and gaming aesthetics. When it comes to materials and build quality, the Cougar Speeder is actually pretty good. It uses this premium chenille yarn mesh fabric that really stands out to me. A lot of mesh chairs will have a plastic type of mesh that, while providing good elasticity, doesn't feel that soft. Is usually pretty coarse to the touch or has a slick feeling. That said, this chenille yarn mesh gives you that same type of elasticity, but feels softer to the touch, which really makes it comfortable in my opinion. It's definitely a nice upgrade from what you'll typically find in mesh office chairs at this price point. The chair has a metal base construction and is rated for up to 265 pounds. Aside from that, the rest of the chair is made almost entirely of plastic, though it is a dense feeling plastic, so the material is pretty sturdy. The build quality is pretty comparable to most chairs you'll find in this price range. It's definitely not high end by any means, but gets the job done. I think you could easily get a solid 3 years of use out of this chair. And when you factor in the unique design aesthetics, features, and high-end mesh you're getting, I think it's pretty reasonable to expect some small compromises in other areas like build quality to get the price down to what it is. Now let's talk about the actual comfort of the chair, starting with the seat. Now mesh seats can be pretty hard to pull off even for higher-end chairs, let alone the budget ones. The Cougar Speeder does a pretty good job with the seat, but still has some of the common issues that most mesh seats have. It uses the same mesh as the backrest. This chenille yarn woven mesh feels very soft to the touch and is pretty comfortable even up against your bare skin. The elasticity is good, so I don't expect it to sag, but like most mesh seats, it's a pretty firm sit due to how tightly they need to wrap the mesh around the frame. The seat has pronounced side bolsters similar to the Herman Miller Aeron, which can make the chair feel a bit restrictive, especially if you're someone with wider hips. The plastic frame is pretty much completely exposed, which makes it not good for people who like to sit cross-legged or with one leg tucked under the other, since your foot and ankles will dig into the frame. Like many mesh seats, the Cougar Speeder has a foam pad in the front that's meant to provide cushion for your legs so they don't come into contact with the hard plastic frame. This is actually a common issue that most mesh seats have. The problem with this design is that when you're sitting in the chair, you kind of sink below that foam pad, which causes a creasing effect. This can make it really uncomfortable because your legs will essentially rest on top of that foam pad and then you can feel it digging into the bottom of your thighs. Now I do feel this creasing effect on the Cougar Speeder, but it's not nearly as bad on this chair due to the deep waterfall front edge that helps keep your legs away from that front edge of the frame. While it's still an issue sometimes and I do feel it, it's nowhere near as bad as other mesh chairs I've tried like the Staples Hykin. Now one positive thing about this chair is that we actually do have a seat pan depth adjustment feature. This allows the chair to accommodate people of different leg lengths. This is pretty rare for mesh chairs in this price range. Now as a rule of thumb, you want your legs to be at a 90-degree angle and you want to be able to fit 2 to 3 fingers of space between the front of the seat and the inside of your knee for proper ergonomics. Now like I said earlier, the hard plastic frame is completely exposed around the entire seat pan. An issue with this is that it makes it so that when you extend the seat pan all the way out, you can kind of feel that hard plastic frame from the back of the seat dig into your tailbone, which can be pretty uncomfortable. So if you're using this chair, I would not extend the seat pan all the way out. Now this could potentially be an issue if you're on the taller end and need that extra seat depth. The backrest on the Cougar Speeder uses a chenille yarn woven mesh material. It's very soft to the touch and comfortable in my opinion. It has a really nice texture to it, so it doesn't feel slick or coarse like the mesh you'll find on many budget chairs. It also has really good elasticity and feels supportive while still allowing you to sink in a bit so it's not too firm. And because it's mesh, it's also very breathable, so it could be a good fit for you if you're someone who tends to run hot while you sit. Overall, I really like this mesh. It's definitely a standout feature to me and makes the chair feel premium. I was actually pretty surprised by it because from a distance, it doesn't look that special, like the same ordinary mesh that you'll see in most budget mesh chairs, but it's definitely not. As for the shape of the backrest, it has a built-in lumbar curve which provides decent support. Now, one gripe I have is how the mesh is wrapped around the frame. Like the seat, the outer frame edges are completely exposed, so you may be able to feel this if you're someone who tends to move around and stretch in your chair. That said, I didn't have any issues when it comes to feeling this hard frame underneath when I'm in a normal sitting position in the middle of the backrest. The chair also has a ratcheting back height adjustment system. This helps accommodate taller people to ensure it gives you proper upper back and shoulder support. It also gives you extra range of motion on the lumbar support, so you can really get it into the right sweet spot. It's smooth to adjust, and I didn't have any issues with it catching or getting stuck like I do with many budget chairs that have this feature. The Cougar Speeder has an adjustable lumbar support with about 3 centimeters of range. When combined with the back height adjustment, you can pretty easily get it into the spot that you need. This lumbar support uses a relatively thick upholstered foam pad. Now, it's a fairly aggressive lumbar support and has no depth adjustment, so you can't control how pronounced it is. In my opinion, it feels pretty comfortable since it's a soft pad with decent give. Unlike many chairs in this price range that have a plastic lumbar support with no padding at all, this lumbar support does not feel pokey despite being pretty pronounced. Overall, it's a decent lumbar support, but might be a bit too aggressive for some people. When it comes to the recline, the Cougar Speeder offers a 90 to 135 degree recline range. It's a nice deep recline that's good for lounging, and the recline has a pretty smooth action. It uses a weight activated mechanism. This mechanism automatically adjusts the recline tension based on the user's weight, eliminating the need for manual adjustments. In my experience, it works pretty well. Now, when it comes to recline, I typically look for how well it can hold you in a partially reclined position. This gives you that kind of floating feeling, and normally I adjust my tilt tension to achieve this effect. If I can get this partial recline in a weight activated mechanism without needing to adjust anything, then I think it's good, and I am able to do this on the Speeder. Now, like I said, these mechanisms work by responding to your body weight to provide the appropriate resistance when you recline. The potential issue with this is that they can result in an inconsistent experience for different users depending on their weight and body type. While weight activated mechanisms are easier to use for people who aren't accustomed to adjusting office chairs, you don't have any control over the recline tension itself. Now, I personally prefer being able to manually adjust the tilt tension based on the situation, but in my experience, this one works pretty well even when I'm using the footrest. This chair also has multiple locking positions while you're in a recline, which is good for people who like to lounge and watch shows. Now, on a side note, what I really appreciate about this chair is that all of the adjustment mechanisms are easily reachable while you're sitting in the chair. From the seat slider to the tilt lock to the height adjustment, I feel like I never need to reach far or over anything to access an adjustment lever. I can be sitting in a normal position and have easy access to everything. Now, this sounds like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how many chairs, especially at this price point, mess this up. The armrests on the Cougar Speeder are pretty unique in terms of their adjustability. They have what Cougar calls their 3D hyperrotation design. For starters, you have your normal height adjustments and depth adjustments. For these, I wish the minimum height could get a bit lower so you can push them under your desk, but this can be easily compensated for with the rotation feature, which we'll get to in a minute. You don't get any width adjustments, which is a bit disappointing. For some people, these arms may be positioned a bit too far apart, which kind of forces your elbows out. Now, what really makes these armrests unique is the 225 degree rotation capability. You can rotate them all the way back to get them out of the way when you're not using them. This allows you to get really close to your desk without the arms bumping into it. This also gets the armrest far enough back so that you can use them while you're reclining, despite the arms themselves not reclining back with you. Now, this is a pretty unique solution for this issue. Also, because of the angle of the arm pads, when you rotate them all the way around, you can actually use them to support your arms when you're using a mobile device or controller, since they're essentially angled up. As for the arm pads themselves, they have really good softness to them, which is good for when you really need to lean into them with your elbows. I also like the shape of them. They're fairly flat on the top so you don't slip off, and they taper off at the sides to prevent any sharp edges from digging into the side of your arms. Overall, these are pretty decent armrests. They're not the most adjustable that I've seen, but they do have a unique way of tackling practical use cases, and they're pretty comfortable to use overall. The headrest on the Cougar Speeder is 3D adjustable with height, pivot, and depth adjustment. The range of motion of the adjustments is pretty good. These adjustments allow you to use the headrest either upright or in a reclined position pretty comfortably. It's also good whether you like to have it up against the back of your head or in the curve of your neck. The depth adjustment lets you use it even if you're someone who tends to sit more forward in your chair. You can also move it out of the way when you don't want to use it. Now, one gripe I have with it is that the depth adjustment doesn't hold its position that well. There's definitely a good amount of play between each increment. And while the adjustment ranges are pretty good, it can be a bit clunky to adjust, particularly with the depth adjustment. Because of the way it's designed, if you want to move it forward, it also kind of goes down. Because of this, it might not be able to accommodate taller people in certain positions. The headrest uses the same chenille yarn mesh material as the rest of the chair. It feels really soft and comfortable to rest your head against. It also doesn't catch on your hair at all, which is pretty common on chairs with cheaper mesh. Overall, I'd say it's a pretty decent headrest. It has good adjustability and generally pretty comfortable to use in multiple positions. My only complaint is how clunky it can be to adjust at times and the fact that it doesn't always hold its position. The Cougar Speeder has a built-in footrest. Now in general, I'm not the biggest fan of footrests on chairs. Most of the time they seem like a gimmick to me. That said, I don't completely hate it on this chair. It has decent padding on top. It's not the most well padded footrest I've seen, but it definitely gets the job done. The good thing about it is that I don't really feel any hard edges digging into my legs, which is usually a problem I have with these rectangular footrests, so that's a huge plus. Another good thing about this footrest is that it retracts very far back, pretty much completely under the seat. Many footrests on chairs that I've tried will still kind of protrude out a bit even when fully retracted, which makes it so you can feel it pressing into your legs or prevents you from putting your legs onto the chair base. I didn't have any issues with that at all on this footrest. In my experience, the footrest also works pretty well with the weight activated recline mechanism. It feels properly balanced, so I'm able to recline pretty easily while using the footrest, even without locking the chair in place. Most chairs I've used in the past with footrests make it really difficult to recline while the footrest is out. And for those chairs, I'd basically need to lock the chair first while I'm reclined and then pull the footrest out after. But on this chair, I didn't really have any issues with that. So overall, while I'm usually not someone who uses the footrest, I say this is definitely one of the better ones I've used. And while it's not the absolute best quality, there just really aren't any major deal breakers with it, so it doesn't detract from the chair at all, which is usually my experience with footrests on office chairs. The Cougar Speeder chair comes in at around $329, and for this price, you get really good features. The materials and build quality are good, but pretty much in line with most other chairs at this price point. It's nothing that'll wow you, but it definitely gets the job done. And when you combine that with the fact that this chair has some gaming design elements that make it unique, it's pretty understandable. My only issue from a value perspective is the warranty policy. According to Cougar's website, you only get a 1-year warranty period. I've noticed that it's very common for these gaming brands to kind of skimp out on their warranty periods for their chairs, and for a chair at this price point, 1 year is honestly pretty bad in my opinion. Ideally, I'd like to see this warranty extended to at least 3 to 5 years to make it competitive with similarly priced ergonomic chairs, especially with the Speeder chair, which is really more of an ergonomic chair than a gaming chair. That said, while I'm not a fan of the warranty, I do think this chair has materials and build quality that are comparable to most other ergonomic chairs at this price point, so I expect it to easily last for 3 years. Overall, I think the Cougar Speeder chair is a pretty solid chair. It's packed with all the features and adjustability that you would want in an ergonomic chair, but has that extra bit of gaming flair that'll make it really stand out in your setup. So if you're interested in checking out the Cougar Speeder, I'll have links to it down in the description.